My mom died in 2016. So they were happily married up until she got bad with Alzheimer's. But I think what happened is because my grandmother died of Alzheimer's, the one that lived with us.
Oh, man.
And I think my mom knew, because it's hereditary, it's through the mother. And so I think she knew it was coming. And I think she had a kind of very conscious, like, let's do everything we want to do and never look back. And sure, we have a high school student and a 19-year-old living at home, but, so they would be gone and we would have, of course, huge parties and just do whatever we wanted. It was a little insane.
Like, do you think maybe your mom was starting to see glimpses of it, or was it a straight up preemptive thing?
I think she was starting to see glimpses of it because my grandmother died at 71 with it, and my mom, I think she had it early onset for sure, but I think she was getting signs of it in like her late 50s.
Okay.
And then it really came on strong when she was like 63 or 62 or 63, where it was like, and I wasn't home because I was in LA and working in TV and never went home, like only on holidays. And the first time I went home, and it was, at this point they'd had a solid decade of us being out of the house and and just doing, being a retired fireman, like that's all firemen do is then figure out ways to hang out with each other even more than after they work together. So there was always like a golf trip or some kind of, whatever. There seemed to be a lot of cruises in my opinion. But yeah, so I went home for a holiday, and I think we'd all thought a lot about it privately, but never talked about it because we just knew that was a possibility. And I remember coming home one time and my mom saying the same thing within a 3-minute period, saying the same thing 10 times. And it being this thing where no one else was acknowledging it. Everyone was acting like nothing was happening. And by the end of that trip home, so it was probably about a week, I pulled my dad aside and said, I need to talk to you. And basically confronted him and said, she's got it and it's happening and it's time to stop pretending that it's happening, not happening.
He was just in denial.
Yeah. But I mean, the second I said it, he broke and was like, you're right. We got into a fight, of course, first, because there always has to be yelling in our family. But yeah, but then he was like, you're right. And I'm like, look, I haven't been here. I know this is like, I'm sure you're pissed that I'm saying this, but as the outsider coming in, like.
That's really big of you.
Well, yeah, but also.
It's your mom.
It's my mom.
Yeah.
And the change in her was so drastic because it truly was like, she was a lot like, did you watch Mad Men?
No. It's one of the few I haven't watched.
You have to watch it. It's so good. It's so good. But she was basically just like the really cool, composed. She was the advice nurse at Kaiser for years. She was the person you called and be like, oh, my thing is bleeding. And she'd be like, put ice on it. It's fine. Don't, you know what I mean? She was that person always.
Hang on a second. My daughter set the bed on fire. Karen! Just put some ice and some bacitracin on it. I'll talk to you.
And she's like, Karen, put some ice and some bacitracin on that, please. Yeah, so she was like the queen of handling it. Mm-hmm. So little things came up before that, before the repetition started. And they were these weird outbursts. And the people that were around were my cousin Stevie and my Aunt Jean, his mom. His dad died when I was 12, which was like the first big hard thing. But it kind of like bound our family together even more. So it was like some holiday and we were all in the kitchen and my mom was, getting everything ready for like family to be over. I feel like it was Easter. And she put like a thing of that like nacho cheese in a glass jar, my cousin Stevie put it in the microwave to heat it up because like for appetizers, and she started screaming at him like everybody went like no, and she was like, you can't put that in there, and he's like, Aunt Pat, look, it's glass, it's whatever. And she was like super upset and like really angry and then she kind of didn't know where she was for a second, and you could tell everyone in the room just got like cold chills and then didn't look at each other and didn't talk about it. And it was like little things like that kept getting laced.
Stevie, where the fuck's that cheese, man? Shit. It's a microwave,
TikTok.
For Christ's sake.
It's almost springtime. Are we going to do this nacho Easter cheese thing or not?
Nacho Easter cheese.
So the indicators were there for a long time. But then when the repetition started, it was just like, this is bad.
I've dealt with it with a few friends and family, and I remember it was a great movie. You Don't Know Jack? You ever seen that on HBO? The Pacino does. Oh, come on, Mercy Killings.
Oh, Kevorkian.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't
see that.
It's so good, and it may be too much for you, but they intercut with real footage of the interviews and stuff of the people. And there was one that just, again, like Norma Arnold's "I Bought You Underpants," it stood out. Was it's a woman who says she went in her backyard, and she said that for 15 minutes she didn't know where she was, and she told her husband, once it gets to a half hour, an hour, it's time for me. Like if I don't know where I am for an hour, like it's time. And then she gets to the point where she doesn't even know who anyone is, and then So
yeah. Well, and no, I mean, the thing is, like, my mom would say that too, and she would say it jokingly, and she would be like, "Push me out on an ice floe." She had all these really good
polar bear.
Seriously, cigarette. She didn't smoke anymore, but she always had her fingers like this. It was that attitude, you know what I mean? Of like, a little drag queenie. But when it came to that time where it would be like, we knew that that's what she would want. It doesn't matter what that person wants, because it's all the other people that are having to deal in the day to day. And that was actually one of my favorite conversations I ever had with my sister. Because when my sister and I, when we were going through this, we were having it bad, because I was down in LA, basically not there for any of the bad shit. Then I would come home and freak out, because it was like coming home and being in the middle of a terrible play where you're just like, what in the fuck is this? Like, unrecognizable family situation. Whereas this was like, I would invite people to our house for holidays. That was like the kind of setup my parents had. And suddenly it was just like my mom, I said this to somebody, it was like, my mom was the B. Arthur of the situation all my life. And suddenly she became Betty White. And you were just like, what the fuck? Like, that's not your personality. Suddenly she was like real airy, and she'd be like, oh, I saw those birds again. And you'd be like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And this isn't my actual mom. It's like a weird, there's somebody in her place that I don't recognize and I don't like, and I don't want to be around. And yeah, so that, it just increased. And my sister and I it would be really hard, because we both wanted to like blame and attack each other. And of course, that's what you always do in a family. It's always like whoever's closest. And there was one time where I had to stay with her. It was the first time I really experienced how bad she had gotten. And I stayed with her all day. And when my sister came to pick me up, and it was like all day, I mean like 5 hours probably, it was awful. I mean, it was just like insanity. And I was crying and going crazy, and my sister's just sitting there like letting me cry in her car. And then I was like, it was so bad, Laura. You don't understand. Like, she fucking is with her every day. She understood. But I go, I'm not kidding. I was thinking of killing her. And my sister goes, just like putting her out of her misery.
I understand. Yeah.
And my sister goes, so at the time there were commercials on all the time for, what's that fucking, there's one medicine, and one of the warnings was, if you have Alzheimer's, it could kill you. It was in the commercial.
Is that the Chantix smoking one, maybe?
It could have been
that
a
thing.
Chantix.
I only guess Chantix because that thing has like 500 side effects.
I know. It seems like they all do now. But there was one that like specifically mentions, you can't give this to Alzheimer's patients. It could kill them. It says it right there. Let's say it's Chantix. Okay. So my sister goes, I say that.
I just lost the sponsorship, guys.
What about, do you want to take that cigarette out of your 2 fingers? Chantix. I'm crying, right? And I'm like, I'm not kidding. I want to kill her. I want her to be dead. And my sister goes, you don't think I've had a Chantix moment?
Yeah, right.
And she's like, I want to kill her every time I go over there. It would be great. That would be perfect. And then like she starts laughing, and I'm just crying because you want to fucking barf, because you're like, what? Like your whole, everything about our whole families and our whole lives and everything changed entirely. All the people that used
in a second.
Yeah, like people start disappearing. Nobody comes over. It's so fucking dark. And then nobody and you just kind of have to keep going, because you know, and my father did not want to put her in a home. He waited for so long for like, I mean, she had it for 12 years and she was only in a home for the last 3, maybe. So she was at home.
It's a long time.
Forever. It was awful. It was bad. And then it was hard because when I first got into therapy, it was when I was working on a daily television show, high pressure, high stress. And I was there like, well, my mom has Alzheimer's. But I don't want to talk about that. I just want to talk about my job and like get my job all figured out. Because I couldn't even talk about her. Like I couldn't, because on top of the fact that we had lost her in this really undignified kind of like, you know, horrible way, I still had all these problems with her. Like there's all these fights that I could have brought up immediately to be like, well, we need to solve this, this, and this. She was really tough about my weight. She was like one of those crazy 60s, like if you don't lose weight, if you're fat, no one will ever love you. And that was like expressly told multiple times where you're
like
just kind
all
of like,
growing up your whole life. Oh, okay.
So when I was starting to kind of, you know, like when puberty hit and I was kind of starting to gain weight, it was like she would pull me aside like she was giving me great advice. And I'd be like, now listen, you got to lose that weight and you will never.
Take some of your cousin's heroin and drop fucking 20, 30 pounds in a week.
You know she's got crank in that SS Chevy Super Sport. You know there's crank in that glove box.
Oh my God.
So there was just those things. There was things where she couldn't let up on her idea. I remember her. She bought me a prom dress when I was a senior in high school that I loved. It was the nicest. Like I tried on all the other shitty dresses and then I tried on this dress at like fucking Nordstrom's or somewhere fancy. And it was really expensive, but it looked great. And then she goes, I'm going to get it for you anyway. She did one of those kind of things. And it was like a bonding moment and we were, you know, finally getting along or whatever. And it was amazing. I mean, she splurged on it. And I remember when we were driving home, she goes, and you can wear it next year when you pledge sororities and you go to fraternity parties. And I almost lost my mind. I was just like, because at that point, I had like cut my hair and dyed it black and done all the I Love the Smiths. And I'd done all those things to kind of outwardly show like, that's not my style at all. And she still, it was almost like, I bought you this dress and now you are going to join a sorority. Where
it's a sorority dress.
No.
Who's pledging
no.
for a sorority and a prom dress?
You want me to go to a formal dance with a frat boy and his frat friends? I
need 3 of y'all to bring my train in through the back right here. If you could do that, guys. I'm pledging.
I'm pledging Alpha Phi, everybody.
It's hell night tonight, guys. Who's got my train?
She wore the nicest dress and she drank the most Keystone. We have to have her in this sorority. I was just like in the car going like, what are you talking about? I'm never going to do. Like she had that way of, it was always just like you're not measuring up to this weird invisible beauty contest that was not fucking happening. And I would try to tell her like, Mom, it's not 1965. We're not air hostesses. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, right.
It was that
perfect.
thing. Like,
yeah.
She'd always go, if you caught her, we'd go to like a family party and you caught her across the room, she'd go like this. A little lipstick.
Always something.
Always.
Always.
You look like a corpse. She used to always say you look like a corpse if you didn't have lipstick on. So she was fucking tough. Like, she was tough in her way. I think it was like that was her survival thing. She knew like, this is a commodity. You know, you're a nurse and you have this job, but you also need to land a man that's got a good job and this is how you earn it. Like it was all laid out very simply, I think, in that way for her. So anything off the beaten path freaked her out and she didn't like it. And she fought me on a lot of those things where I would just be like, it's too late. Like I'm already like this and you made me. So fuck you.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted me to be a proper lady, you shouldn't have left me out in the fucking field for 5 hours every day. Like you give what you get or you get what you give. So yeah.
And you're setting beds on fire and shit. You know what I love about that? I just thought about it is that your goddamn dad's a fireman. Your mom's putting that shit out. Long distance. It's a long distance.
There were things where like I wonder.
I'm setting up a cruise.
I'm getting more insurance for that.
More insurance.
I wonder if she threw those blankets away and just never told him. Because I know there was stuff I did where she was like, don't tell your father.
Yeah, I'm sure.
She would just be like, we can't send this all the way up to the top.
To the top.
So she would cover for me sometimes. But I do think it was just that, it was just like you leave children to grow wild every day after school and they're going to do it.
They're going to grow wild.
Yeah.
Going back to your mom, I had a friend of mine, she was 16 when she passed in a car crash. And I was talking to the doctor, and I don't know why we got to talking about it. She was on life support and stuff. When we were talking about the soul, we had a conversation about the soul, and he told me it was his belief. He's like, everyone or most people say, it's in the chest, it's here, your soul's here. And he said, I believe it's in the brain. And he said the reason was because they can put another heart in you, lungs, kidney, they can put all this shit in you and you're still the same person. But the moment something happens to your brain, and you said that it wasn't my mom anymore. And that's why he's like, I think that's where your soul is. And I've always remembered that. And I was like, man, it's if that's what the soul is all about, then that's got to be true.
It is true. And also because we watched her. Yeah, she like what happens is you just start getting holes in your brain. Mm-hmm. And so people basically regress by decades. So you could mark time with her. So for a while she'd be like, at the dinner table, she'd say this all the time. She'd look to my dad and go, I think it's time to go home. And my dad would go, we are home. That's where we are right now. And then she'd go, I know. And try to pretend like she'd always cover and pretend that she knew. But after a while, she would be like, Jim, we have to, she didn't know that we were her children and that she wanted to go home because they were single newlyweds in San Francisco. And then there was a time when my sister was sitting on the couch with her. So
she would go back to memories of hers.
Yes.
That's interesting too. I say, I don't know a ton about it, but that, I've seen people don't know where they are or anything, but that's interesting to go back to a different place in time.
Yeah, that's how it was explained to us anyway, where it's kind of like it's as the, brain is eroded or whatever, you're holding on to less and less of like the present and you're going back. So there was one point where my sister was sitting on the couch with her, and the thing was she always knew my dad, and she always asked for my dad, which was super fucking irritating because you could be there like, I'm here to be the good daughter and spend time with my mom, and she'd be like, where's Jim? Where's your father? And you'd just be like, why doesn't anything count? Everything about this disease is so infuriating, so frustrating. But one time my dad walked into the kitchen and my mom looked at my sister and goes, who's that? And
that's cute though.
Isn't that the cutest?
That is cute.
And my sister told me that, she was like, Mom was super into Dad in the kitchen today. Like that would have been her pick.
Yeah.
And it felt like she always had that with him. If he was there, she was okay, which was really lovely. But then also felt bad to us because then after a while it was just like, you're just watching someone leave.
My mom's mom died of that, and I watched her, and there would be times where, and this is awful, but I would go, and she lost so much weight. She got so small at the end, and it was just a skeleton. She was so frail, and I'd go visit her in the hospital, and there would be times where I couldn't take it, And I thought later too, like how fucking selfish of you can't take it. This poor person's dying, but also I knew she didn't even know who I was, and she didn't know if I was there for 10 minutes or 10 hours.
Yes.
And I would go and always hug and kiss and say something, and then, it got to the point where she didn't even know what was going on. And she, passed quickly after that.
And I think, it's just, people say that a lot of times, like, you're being selfish or whatever, but it couldn't be further from the truth because the people who are connected to the people who are sick are the ones that suffer the most. My mom didn't know. There was one time she came downstairs. She came downstairs wearing a fleece in her underwear with sunglasses on her head. And she was like,
just the top.
And there was people in the living room, and we're just like, oh no, what?
Y'all see my surfboard?
Seriously. She had no idea. And then she was like, well, what are you two up to? Or like, what's going on in here? And we're like, Mom, there were a bunch of those, but we were embarrassed. So we were going, oh my God. Like my mother wouldn't leave the house without the perfect scarf around her neck. Coming downstairs, in a fleece and old underwear was just never, ever happening. Yeah. So it was all our impact. It was all our suffering. And she was, there were definitely times I know she was suffering, but that is intermittent, I think. And it's so much harder for the people around that are just like trying to fucking keep it together. It's awful. It's the worst fucking disease.
It is the worst.
It's terrible.